Hey everybody, I'm Jack Flyer, and today I'll be reading chapter 4, Balloon in the Air, of my book, The Diary of Jack Flyer. If you could hit the like button, and anyone that hasn't subscribed, I'd really appreciate your subscription. Alright, let's get into it. Chapter 4, Balloon in the Air. January 2nd, 1982. I've been enjoying my morning flights and really getting the hang of it. I had my landings nearly perfect and performed a wheeler landing Thursday morning, followed by a touch and go. Yay me. And more amazing was Thursday morning when I opened my hangar doors, I was surprised to see a gift neatly wrapped sitting on my desk. I couldn't believe it. Doris had bought me a World War I fighter pilot leather helmet. And this is the actual helmet, guys. She bought me. Oh my God, I'm bald. True story, this is the leather helmet she bought me. Years later, I still have it. Still wear it every day. I have a fascination with early aviation and love World War I aircraft. I dream I will one day own my own fighter. I'm partial to the Newport 11C1, arguably the prettiest plane ever built. I wear my World War I helmet every day I'm home, flying or not. Yep, even at the dinner table, to Doris's disgust. Unfortunately, there have been several accidents this week, all fatal, but it has not stopped my enthusiasm. A wing detached on a home-built wooden craft just 50 kilometres from here. Apparently, the pilot-builder was on his first test flight when the left wing folded after a fast flyby followed by a sharp positive G pull-up, which caused excess load and the left wing collapsed, tearing off a large chunk of the fuselage in the process. The witness saw the pilot jump from the plane but never had time to open his chute. A very sad event indeed. Rest in peace, Brian M. Today was a beautiful morning. Clear sky, no wind, nice and cool. I took off and flew my usual circular pattern around my property, enjoying the calm conditions for a while. As I had a full tank of fuel, about 1.5 hours endurance, I decided I'd venture out a bit. So I headed east towards the ranges, which are some 16 kilometres away in distance. I felt very vulnerable as I crossed the small stretches of scrub that back onto my property, but the enjoyment of flight far outweighed all my anxieties. I had almost reached the base of the ranges when I noticed a hot air balloon in the distance. I felt as if I was being drawn in towards the balloon and could not help but fly towards it. Entranced, I continued flying, focused only on catching the near-still object floating on a cushion of air in the distance. And as I drew near, I decided to climb above 300 feet to match its height of some 500 foot. I flew past the balloon at a separation distance of about 100 feet and was chuffed when the passengers all waved frantically at me. I waved back, but I hoped they weren't waving in distress. I continued flying several circuits around the balloon, truly in awe at the sight, and at one stage managed to get up close enough to admire an attractive young lady clutching the basket white-knuckled. Not sure if she'd seen me wink at her or not. I made one last 180-degree turn around the balloon and looked to get my bearings. I located the Dandenong Ranges and headed for home. I assumed I had not flown far and headed back along the ranges. It was then I noticed my ground speed was rather slow compared to earlier. As I approached the range's base, I encountered some uncomfortable turbulence that made me rather nervous, so I decided to head slightly inland. The bumps continued to a lesser degree and I continued heading back west. After around a half an hour, I had become conscious to the fact that I still had not located my property, as everything looked so similar. I became slightly disorientated and could feel beads of sweat dripping from the inside of my leather helmet, and my goggles continued to fog over as I desperately searched for home. I guessed that I should be pretty close and continued my track west, hoping to pick up some familiar ground. I saw a town in the distance and figured it to be my hometown, Coldstream, but could not recognise any roads or structures. I really started to panic at this stage and I let the speed drop down a couple of times, just from lack of concentration inside the cockpit. At one stage I felt the plane shaking and the wing dropped lightly. I realised my speed was only 25 knots and a quick burst of power rectified the situation. By now the sun was beating down with immense heat and my plane was beginning to succumb to the harsh turbulence, which at times was overriding my full control inputs. There was one instant where the right wing was lifted up some 60 degrees and I desperately held full counter aileron with full rudder, and yet the plane did not react instantly. Instead, it continued its uncontrolled bank and it felt like an eternity before she regained some control and rolled back level. This really frightened me and I really wished to be on the ground more than ever. I headed back west-northwest to get closer to the ranges again and then continued my westerly track, desperately searching for familiar ground to the point where my neck was aching and I must have looked like a carnival clown with the head twisting from side to side. The fear and adrenaline was loud as my heart pounded in my chest. My hands were slippery and my eyes were stinging with sweat as I was struggling to maintain some sort of calm. I really wondered what the hell I was doing up here in this unforgiving three-dimensional world and considered landing, which I should have done, in an open paddock. I was really fighting the controls but continued flying west when in the distance to the south I could make out the scrub line that backs onto the back of my property and headed towards it with some relief. I noticed somehow I'd gained height and now sat at 900 feet. Oops. So I made a descent back to 300 feet and geez Louise, it was even rougher. As I neared the scrub I could make out my beloved aero paddock, and the relief and excitement that came over me was overwhelming as I nearly wept with delight at the thought of landing home. This was to be short-lived. I started across the scrub line, about 1 kilometre wide, when suddenly the engine picked up revs to almost full, and then died. My plane stopped all forward motion instantly and I was thrown forward. I remembered the engine failure procedure and I pushed the stick forward, but it was too late, she'd already stalled. I felt the plane sink and the right wing drop a little. I still held full forward stick and as a reflex tried to correct with opposite aileron. This made the wing drop even faster and my next reaction was the rudder, which rolled her back in line. As the scrub drew near, I started easing stick pressure, but had not had enough time to check the airspeed. I was now only metres from diving into the scrub nose first, so I pulled her back hard to get her level and we skimmed the treetops. With a sound of rushing wind and a strong sinking feeling, I came to the realisation this was not going to end pleasantly. As the plane sank, I yanked the stick back all the way and braced myself for the inevitable impact. The tail collided with the treetops first, as I flared with full back stick using both hands, and then immediately the nose was thrown down abruptly. It then became inverted and dropped through the trees, slightly inverted tail first. I'll never forget the sounds of trees crackling and the fabric tearing, and then the deafening dead silence, bar a few birds that seemed to be mocking me. I was still strapped into the harness and had come to rest with the nose pointing at the sky. I carefully unbuckled myself and climbed down to inspect the damage as my first thoughts were my plane, my poor Black Betty. Well, my poor Black Betty was ridden off. As the initial shock wore off, I became aware that I was badly injured. I'd guessed my ankle was broken and one arm was completely incapacitated, also feared broken. I was also bleeding heavily and had no choice but to start walking or hobbling home, which was around 2 kilometres. In shock and in a disorientated state, I again became lost as I struggled to drag my broken body through the thick scrub. Pain was taking hold and every movement was a real struggle, but with sheer determination I continued searching for my way out. After what felt like an eternity, I found a track which led me to the main road, and after a short walk I managed to flag down a passing car. I was taken to hospital where I was met with Doris, who was very distressed to say the least. I suffered multiple lacerations, 33 stitches, broken wrist, collarbone, 3 fractured fingers, a broken ankle and multiple bruising. Charlie and a couple of mates recovered Black Betty and told me it appears to have run out of fuel. I'd say they're spot on. As it turns out, wind was around 16 knots easterly, so I had a headwind on the way back from the balloon, and total flying time was 1 hour and 35 minutes. I'm feeling pretty sore right now, and I meant to stay off the booze. But after all that, I needed a smoke and half a bottle of rum. Josh wants me to stop all this flying business, but now I know it was just the fuel. I'm keen to build or rebuild Black Betty too. Thinking a longer wing for better glide. P.S. and bigger fuel tank.